If a product feels slow and clunky, I'm going to churn off it. Right now, you can go into ChatGPT and hit Command K. And the reason that exists in the product is because I bugged the team and asked them to add it.
Do you have like a secret sauce when it comes to building a product that people love and also talk about?
To build an ardent fan base, customers who really love you, you have to go beyond that point and create these moments of surprising joy. I think if you look at all of the really inspirational products and experiences in the world, they all have some element of this. They deeply solve the problem and do so in a way that's delightful, and they have features that may seem almost frivolous on the surface, but actually are some of the most memorable and amazing parts of the experience.
Hello everyone, I'm Benedict, co-founder and CEO of Jamie. And at Jamie, we are obsessed with how top performers work, optimize their productivity, and scale companies. And that's why I'm extremely excited to have Gaurav Vohra on this podcast today. Gaurav is part of the founding team of Superhuman, the company that revolutionized email productivity. And he has not only scaled Superhuman and led growth, product, and analytic teams there, but he has also been helping some of the fastest growing startups out there like Clay, Weblet, and others as a growth advisor. Today, we'll dive deep into his productivity secrets and what tool he uses to scale startups as fast as he goes through his inbox at lightning speed. Thanks a lot for joining me here.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
Very excited as well. I've been a Superhuman user for quite some years now, so very curious to...
How many years?
I think probably 2 years now.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
So I have been using the recent features that have been shipped.
Amazing.
And now couldn't imagine my life without it, to be honest. Was just talking about it over lunch today.
What did he say?
Someone I met. He was mentioning that there are a couple of tools that he could not live without and work without. And Superhuman was the one that he mentioned first. And then we kind of talked about it a little bit, how it just gives us ease of mind, organizes the inbox, and also just makes email so much more fun. Actually.
That's great. Wow, that's amazing to hear. Honestly, it warms the cockles of my heart to hear this. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure there's still a lot that I didn't mention in the intro. What would you like to add about yourself personally?
I sometimes mention this, I'm UK born and raised, even though I live here in San Francisco. So occasionally, if my humor doesn't get across, it's probably because it was a dry joke. So I want to mention that up front, just in case.
Okay, well, good to know. But I'm sure we'll all manage. Like I said, we want to talk a little bit about productivity and also the work style that you've developed over the last couple of years. And one thing to start off with that I'm personally curious about is how do you actually start your workday? And is email the first thing that you check, or do you have a different routine there?
Yeah, interesting question. So it really comes down to the definition of what your workday is, right? There's like, what do you do when you wake up? And then there's what do you do when you finally get to your desk? And in my case, those two moments are about 2 or 3 hours apart from each other. Like I'm usually awake at 6:30 or thereabouts, and I'm at my desk around 9:15, 9:30, during which time I've gotten up, maybe I've met someone for coffee. If I'm feeling good, I might have gone for a run. And then there's part of like getting my son ready for school and taking him to school. And then I finally get to my desk. Yeah, by which time I have a pretty good sense of what's actually, priority for the day. So going back to what I think is the spirit of your question is like, how do you start the day, which is well before I get to the desk. I do check my phone. I check my major communication channels. I want to know if there's anything important that I need to be aware of, because a lot of the people I'm working with are in different time zones. I have family in the UK. I'm in the Bay Area. So I check my major communication channels, iMessage, WhatsApp, email. I deliberately avoid Slack. I don't dive into Slack in the morning. It's just too distracting and too low altitude in terms of salience. If something's really important, someone will have sent me a text instead. I just get a sense of, okay, did something really exciting happen overnight, like an inbound email or a response to a message I really need to see that could shape or change my morning. I also look at my calendar and I make sure that I know what's happening for the next 6 hours. More recently, I've been trying something new, which is that I schedule things to kickstart my day around 6:30 or 7. So publishing a Substack or social post to go live at 6:30 in the morning is a great excuse to get out of bed at 6:31 to make sure that I then do the whatever, like link in comments thing at the very end, or, that I'm keeping on top of replies in the first 30 minutes. It's also the right time to publish when I'm in the Bay Area, because you catch the Europeans before they log off, and you also get the whole of, well, maybe even some of Asia, and you get the whole of the Americas. So that's some of the stuff I've been starting to do in the morning, but then giving me still like 60 to 90 minutes of free time, so to speak, to be with my son, take him to school, get myself over to the office, that kind of thing.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And also, I think that's a very honest recommendation of mine to subscribe to the newsletter, which I've been catching then in the European time zone. So amazing. I think this is always an interesting and very, very insightful read there. You already mentioned some of the tools that you're using. So, for example, there was Slack. Of course, there's Superhuman. But despite that, what else is in your daily tech stack?
Yeah, so for my browser, my tech stack could be so many things, right? It could be, there's like the long tail of tools I use 5% of the time. I'll mostly talk about what constitutes the 80%, the 6 or so tools that I spend 80% of my time in. Browser, Chrome, and I think this is pretty weird. Unlike most people, I use the browser version of most everything. I use the Superhuman browser version, not the Superhuman native app. I've never really used our native app. I use Notion and Figma in the browser. The one exception to this is I do use the Slack native app. Like, that one is painful to load in the browser, and I'm more accustomed to the keyboard shortcuts and everything within the context of the native app. But everything else, Airtable is another one that I didn't mention, but like everything else, I just fire up a new tab in a browser. And for me, that really works because I keep my browser contexts very clean. For a start, I practice tab 0, right, which is like inbox 0, but with the number of tabs I have open. So I have a window that might be, maybe it's a workflow to do with my advising, and I'll have my Airtable open, the client Notion, an email that I'm drafting to the client, and maybe a Google tab or something, a ChatGPT I'm researching. And then that whole window is like a self-contained package that uses my tech stack to get something done. Having to toggle between native apps when I'm across different contexts doesn't really work for me. So, I would say I'm a browser power user. That being said, Chrome, not Arc or any other fancy browser.
Have you tried them?
Embarrassingly, I haven't. Partly because I feel like I have so much workflow built into Chrome in terms of extensions and like keyboard shortcuts. Like, I'm an aggressive power user of Vimium, which is a Chrome extension for creating keyboard shortcuts all throughout your browser. I barely use my mouse when I'm navigating the web. It's a lot of using keyboard shortcuts to find links and, scroll up and down and all this sort of stuff. In terms of a persistent note taker, I'm currently using Reflect. Clean, fast, syncs nicely across tools. My calendar booking tool at the moment is Reclaim.ai, which Dropbox recently acquired. Again, relatively clean, relatively fast. I used to use it for the calendar sync feature, where it could push events from one calendar to another, but I stopped using that, and now I'm just still using the meeting links. So I take persistent notes in Reflect, but I take non-persistent notes in Sublime for whatever reason. Like, I always have a code editor open. For me, that's Sublime. And I just have like a series of, anywhere from 1 to 5 windows or tabs open in Sublime that have like different thoughts that I want to dump somewhere. And then occasionally, if I want to keep those thoughts, I'll put them in Reflect, and then I can search them and reference them later. But quite often, I don't want to reference them later. They're just a reminder to do something, get something done, right? So I always have Sublime open. And then in terms of my like personal CRM for my advising and also my life admin, I've basically offloaded all of that into Airtable. I have a very interesting system if you're interested for my personal admin in Airtable that I could show you, where I've offloaded that. So that's like, I would say, the core tech stack.
Yeah, I'm super curious actually to learn more about this, how you did it.
All right. Okay. Let's go back to data. All right, so this is great, right? Wow. Like, these are all the things I have to do, and they recur on annoying time frames. So here's a great example. Pay property tax installment 2, right? This thing, I last did it on the 1st of April. That's actually a date in the future. I forward dated it because of I did it in advance. It recurs every 12 months. I actually want 2 months of advance notice. So it recurs on 26/4/1, but I want to be reminded about it with 2 months of notice so I don't screw it up and like forget to pay. So I get an email reminder then on 2/1, which is going to tell me that I need to pay property tax installment 2. I can have some details like a URL and so on there. And so what this does is it basically it puts my entire life of like stupid like admin on autopilot. You know, I can see if there's tasks that are overdue, everything from car maintenance to like renewing passports. This one's hilarious. Get haircuts. Last done. Actually, I'm pretty sure I got it last done in like October. No, it was August. And because every 8 months, you know, what does that mean? Yeah, for some reason this hasn't updated. There it is. Okay, next due on. Okay, so I'm not so overdue. I've got like 7 weeks.
Yeah, you still got some time left.
I've got some time left on this one. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, because honestly, I was even this right. Like I don't know how people do it. Do they have a recurring calendar invite for themselves every 4 weeks when they get their haircut, or do they just like look in the mirror and think, I should get my haircuts? When you have long hair like I do, it comes around once every year, more or less, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I should probably do that. It's like half my Sunday gone. You know, it's like an admin task, not dissimilar to paying my property taxes.
It's actually super interesting to see that, because I mean there's so many like to-do apps and productivity tools which promise to help with the task management, right? And I mean I'm personally guilty of trying every single one of them and then maybe using them for a month, then switching again, then ending up in Apple Notes maybe, then just using my calendar for it. I feel like it's for me. I
feel like there's different grains of to do, right? Like the thing I was specifically trying to put on autopilot was slow moving tasks that are really important to get done, or if not important, at the very least, don't take a lot of time. You just need to remember to do them. And if you fail to do them, then maybe over time something really catastrophic happens. So like cleaning your washing machine is a great example, or like your dryer, right? Like cleaning your dryer. Doesn't matter if you don't do it most of the time. Forget to do it for 5 or 10 years, your house may burn down. Oh, well, you know, it's like, how much of a risk do you want? It takes not that much time to do it, but, you know, having some kind of periodic reminder is useful. But this is like super slow moving. Something that's fast moving, like, you know, your to-do list for your work, or like, I got to get back to these people. I think you have to have other systems. Like there's no point putting that into like a structured database, essentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Apple reminders and basically any to-do system have recurring reminders. But you know, why use existing software when you can build your own that is like perfectly custom fit to you? Like that feature specifically of remind me X months in advance. Like this is the buffer, the margin of safety I want, is incredibly valuable. Just being reminded by Apple on the day of its due date is not sufficient. And then I could change the date on Apple reminders to be the advanced date, but then I'm not really thinking about it in the right way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it just gives you ease of mind also having it in there and knowing that you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I've definitely tapped like done on Apple reminders when like by accident. And it's so non-persistent and I don't know what I did. And then I'm like scraping through trying to figure out what I just tapped done on.
Yeah, one thing also related to the tools and also building your own workflows kind of. One thing I'm curious about is how the standard actually, or the expectations that you have at tools have changed after building and growing Superhuman.
Oh, because interesting.
For me, there's like, this it's not a commercial or anything, but for me, like Superhuman it's like a feeling when you use it, right?
Yeah.
And it's extremely fast. The shortcuts are super valuable. So like you kind of raise a certain standard there.
Yes.
And how has this been for you?
Definitely. I look for keyboard shortcuts, you know, low latency. If a product feels slow and clunky, I'm going to churn off it. You know, that's why I moved from Evernote to Reclaim. I look for the keyboard shortcuts. I was pleased the other day to find Command K in Figma. I didn't know how to crop an image. I'm a Figma noob, so I was like, how do I crop it? It's Command K crop. Okay, great. Like, I don't know if they added Command K before or after Superhuman. Who knows? But I definitely look for that. This is a fun story for listeners. Right now, you can go into ChatGPT and hit Command K. And the reason that exists in the product is because I bugged the team and asked them to add it. Command K in ChatGPT currently works as just search. It doesn't do It's not the everything command palette, but it's a shortcut to opening search.
Oh, wow.
It is the one keyboard shortcut that if you hover over the icon, like the tooltip actually appears just like Superhuman. Like you search the magnifying, hover over magnifying glass, Command K. But yeah, I was like, man, this is annoying. I really want Command K in ChatGPT. And that's great. Like they have a lot of users. So I feel like I had some nice positive influence on the world there, hopefully.
Definitely, yeah. And now I feel kind of embarrassed that we don't have it yet at Jamie. So I think this is something we need to push on the product roadmap.
Yes. Something else that's like quite a nice little productivity hack, and I will evangelize this, till probably the day I die, is a text expander. Like I truly believe that like text expanders with most of the standard things you have to type preloaded into it is like an absolute game changer. So I have, for me, I like to type dates out, like, YYYY, MMDD, helps me just date stamp things when I'm making notes, when I'm naming documents, whatever else, right? So I have like YMD as the keyboard shortcut to expand the date, but I also have my email address, my home address, my phone number, all of these details about myself just preloaded. Usually it's like a semicolon and then a letter. So, semicolon G would then expand to my like email address. And I have probably about 15 of these, such that when I'm filling in a form online, credit card information and details of stuff, the credit card information comes from a secure like password vault, but just the address and like my phone number and all that stuff, just like 2 or 3 keystrokes makes the really mundane parts of navigating the digital world just melt away. So I'm a huge, huge evangelist of that. And then here's one that might be an interesting one for listeners. There's actually a setting on your iPhone where you can turn the brightness down below the minimum threshold, which I am just like the most aggressive user of. So that's like the usual brightness. I tap a thing and it goes dark, and then I tap it again, it goes bright. It's this one right here on my home row. And, we're all looking at our phones well past the time where it's healthy to be looking at a screen. This takes the brightness down by like a further 50%. So, in my tech stack, maintaining my own ability to sleep and to not be like needlessly woken up by the brightness of my phone, even when it's on the lowest setting, it's still too bright. So I use that from about 7 p.m. onwards every day.
Oh, wow. Okay. So actually a very, very mindful productivity hack.
Yes,
and
a mindful one.
Sleep is, the relevance has been increasing over the last couple of years, and I think many people talk about it also with companies like 8 Sleep, for example, coming up. But this being one of the most important productivity hacks as well. And also personally, I'm a fan of the text replacements that you mentioned. So I think this is probably one of the most underrated productivity hacks out there.
100%.
And once it's set up, it saves you pretty much, a couple of minutes every day, at least.
Literally takes like 3 or 4 minutes to set up. I'm a big fan of A-Text by Trankinam. I think that's his name.
Okay.
It's like $5. Yeah.
Add it in the show notes.
Put it in. Yes. Shout out to A-Text.
Cool. Now, we talked a little bit about your productivity, and I know like meetings are something like very controversial, and also something I think there has been a lot of change over the last couple of years, as a lot of communication is also moving towards more async communication, even though you said you don't check Slack every morning or directly in the morning. But would be curious to know what roles actually do meetings play in your work, and do you prefer actually shorter ones? Do you prefer async, or do you prefer structured long discussions, brainstormings?
Yeah. Okay, so here's my rant on meetings. Let's, I think, first examine what is a meeting good for, or what is synchronous conversation good for. Synchronous conversation is incredible for high bandwidth communication that's relatively shallow, meaning you and I can exchange lots of ideas with each other way more efficiently than if we were typing or even sending each other looms back and forth. But we won't engage with any of those ideas past a certain depth. Whereas if we were maybe troubleshooting over an email back and forth, or sharing looms with each other that were like quite thoughtful, we would get pretty deep into the problem space, especially if you're collaborating in an asset like a Figma or a Notion, for example. But in a meeting, like you'll get 2 or 3 points into anything, and then that's about as deep as you'll go. But you'll cover hundreds of those, maybe in 30 or 60 minutes. So meetings are incredible if you have to very rapidly bust your way through a problem, share a load of context with each other to get to what I refer to as symmetric information. That's where everyone has the same information. And identify sufficiently what are the next steps that require deep work, and then figure out like assigning and allocating those. It's also great for rapport and trust building. Like just if you need to, get to the point where you got to repeatedly give someone, candid and tough feedback because you're working super closely together. Like, you should spend 30 minutes just talking face to face in order to build that rapport. Because of those fundamental properties of meetings, I use it for advising calls, one-on-one coaching and feedback, quickly reviewing something where I have a ton of experience and the person has a ton of context, and we need to like mutually exchange that information in real time. However, it's part of a broader communication stack. If, let's say, someone wants me to review something and I don't need the context from them, it's a one-way review, then I'll do a Loom instead, right? And it could be a 20-minute Loom. It could basically be a meeting, but I'll do it in 20 minutes, record it, send it over, and then they can watch it in 2x speed at 10 minutes. And then there's obviously email, Slack, text messages, etc. for, I would say, more quick back and forth. That is like a loop that can be opened and closed within a few messages. Or an email could be maybe several messages or more detailed, but does not require the rapid exchange of ideas in the space of 20, 30, 40 minutes. I do like to keep meetings relatively, I guess, organized in terms of here's 3 to 7 things we want to talk through. Anything more than that, and you're kind of stuffing the meeting and spending too much time creating the agenda, kind of work for work's sake. Anything less than that, and you could have just spent like 30 seconds thinking about it up front and probably use the time better. And I would say the optimal meeting time is like 30 to 60 minutes. Anything less than 30 is of questionable value. That's more of just like hey, let's quickly troubleshoot this thing together for like 5 minutes. Anything more than an hour, like you should only really do if you're deeply jamming on something and in flow. Otherwise, it just creates fatigue.
Yeah. I mean, that resonates a lot with me. And also, I think, meetings can be great to like brainstorm collectively at some point. Maybe if it's just getting ideas out there quickly. But really reaching that certain level of depth makes sense to take it in a more, or to tackle it in a more focused approach, actually.
And I think brainstorms is a type of getting to information symmetry, right? Everyone has these ideas. I've got 5, you've got 5, one of which is overlapping, but collectively we have 9. So after the brainstorm, we both see the 9, and then we're at information symmetry. But of course, the ideas are terrible at the end of the brainstorm and need someone to go and develop them. So at the end of the brainstorm, usually the next step is then someone go and do something with all of this.
Interesting. Maybe about actually alignment. And this is a slight switch now, but you've been leading the growth team, you've been leading the product team, you've been leading, I think, the marketing and the analytics team. So you've been leading various teams at Superhuman. And what's interesting that from what I see from the outside, of course, they're quite different in the way they work and also the responsibilities in each team. How do you actually make sure that all of these topics in the end are aligned? And maybe what's like one thing that they all have in common that you've experienced?
Interesting. I think one thing they all have in common is you just have to be like friends with everyone on the other team. Like you have to understand the leaders and the people on those teams and just be like able to go and have a conversation with them at any point in time about just about anything. I always used to make a point of making sure that I knew people who I'm working closely with at a deeper level than just colleagues, right? Like I want to be able to text them and like, not that I have the time to do this, but like, should they be in town, like go grab a drink or whatever. Like I want to be at that level with everybody. So that's something I think basically all those functions have in common with each other. It's interesting to think about product growth and marketing in particular, or I should say, at least in a PLG company, marketing, growth, and product, with growth kind of sandwiched in the middle, because I like to think of things in terms of a customer through line or journey. And most customer journeys will take you from the work product of the marketing team through the work product of the growth team and then into the work product of the product team. And I think it's always grounding to just think about the customer journey and the thing that you're building collectively, and then to apply your team to that journey and say, well, where are we responsible in this journey? Are we singularly responsible for a slice of it, and then on the left-hand side, a different team is responsible, and on the right-hand side is another team? Or do we overlap on a particular area with another team, but we tackle, I don't know, the asynchronous part of this journey, and they tackle the synchronous part of this journey? And, you've got to think about it in terms of customers at the end of the day. What you then get is a series of APIs. You get the API between your team and the customers. You get the API between your team and the other teams. Okay, this is a part of the journey that is like from when they hit the website all the way through to when they're a 7-day happy customer. That's like usually a growth. There'll be like a website pod and then an activation pod. That's like the API between those pods and the customer. But of course, on the marketing end, you have another API. You have an API to how those people are landing on the website. That's the marketing team. And then after they become a 7-day retained customer, they get handed off into the product. You have an API with the product team over there. Well, of course, if the product team then builds something that you want to then showcase in the first 7 days, that's an API back. Well, that's a ping back from the product team to what you're focused on. So I always like to think in terms of, okay, how do these teams kind of fit together? There's no one answer to that question. Like, just like software and APIs, there are many different form factors and equilibria that are valid. And you just have to figure out in the context of this customer journey, this company, these people, what makes the most sense. I think growth teams are probably some of the most interesting in this regard, because what I just described was for a PLG company. For a B2B SaaS company that's sales driven, it's totally different. The growth team is a completely different being, may not even exist, or if it does exist, it's probably closer to the marketing demand gen engine. So it's really important to basically know what the customer journey is at the end of the day, and then kind of get your teams configured around that.
Yeah, super interesting. Also to see the differences in terms of business. I mean, Superhuman is always taken as the example of a PLG company, and also like a company we've read a lot about and copied the PMF survey or engine that you've developed, for example, where you also see how where we actually noticed how our growth actually accelerated once we've also reached this certain threshold in the PMF survey, which was super interesting.
Amazing.
But
Wow.
there it was very clear to see how much impact product just has on growth.
Yeah.
So seeing the connection there, even if they look totally different from the outside.
It'd be cool for you to write about that. Maybe have a little graph of growth, and then the point when you started getting more PMF.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. Yeah, true. It's a good point. Maybe some inspiration for the next LinkedIn post.
Lovely. Amazing.
Curious, I mean, Superhuman has been growing extremely well over the last couple of years, built an amazing product, built also, I feel like, a very, very large fan base. I mean, just me talking with a friend over lunch about it is, I think, probably a prime example of that. Do you have a secret sauce when it comes to building a product that people love and also talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a combination of two things. One, make sure that you're delighting customers, right? Delight, we define as moments of surprising joy. So make sure that you are, maybe this goes without saying, but you have to be solving a problem, right? That's incredibly important to the customer. And I think many startups don't solve a problem that's important enough or frequently experienced enough. Maybe that's table stakes. But you have to deeply solve that problem and get customers to let's say, a point of neutrality. They may have had a negative feeling that was driving them to find a solution. You solve that problem and bring them to neutral. But to build an ardent fan base, customers who really love you, you have to go beyond that point and create these moments of surprising joy. You can do that as, I guess, icing on top of the cake when you solve the problem, right? The problem can be then solved and then some. Or you can have, cherries on top that are completely detached from the problem, but are features or parts of the experience that just feel good for feel good's sake. I think if you look at all of the really inspirational products and experiences in the world, they all have some element of this. They deeply solve the problem and do so in a way that's delightful, and they have features that may seem almost frivolous on the surface, but actually are some of the most memorable and amazing parts of the experience. Like Tesla's dog mode is a great example, right? The fact that they even built that and called it something is, testament to this idea of like, okay, yes, it's actually solving a pretty deep problem. No one wants their dog to be trapped in a car or for the police to be called because it looks like their dog is trapped in the car. So they solved the problem deeply and then made it really delightful by giving it really funny and quirky branding.
Yeah, that makes actually sense. I was also thinking about like a car comparison. I mean, every car kind of solved the problem of going from A to B.
Right.
But then there are those luxury brands which create an amazing experience while getting from A to B.
Yes.
And where they can also charge a premium, for example. And I think this is also something which you've kind of done on purpose, I don't know, in the beginning, which I'm curious about in terms of like the price point also you picked, which is different than the usual productivity tool, I would say. Yeah. And also the whole customer journey when it comes to the personal onboarding, for example. Was that something that you decided on purpose in the beginning and was really well thought through?
All of those things kind of fitted together, right? So I think the first thing I would say is that the competitive ecosystem matters an enormous amount, right? Like depending on who you're going up against, massively shapes how you go to market, which includes like your pricing, your packaging, how you then onboard customers, everything. In our case, we were going up against these two giant incumbents that had been around for decades, Gmail, Outlook. And because those products are relatively decent, right? Like they work first and foremost, and they have massive distribution and reach. In our case, it was very easy for customers to churn off of the new product and go back to those products if there was anything that wasn't correct about the new experience. Compare that to a new industry where it's just a land grab situation. It's a new offering, a new thing that doesn't exist. Technology's unlocked something new, and now it's just a question of acquiring all the users. You could argue that the LLM space is like this with ChatGPT, right? It didn't exist 3 years ago, and really it was a race to go and acquire as many users as possible, kind of regardless of how much that cost, regardless of whether it was a good product even or a good onboarding experience. Many of us tried ChatGPT when it first came out, and we used it to write, a haiku about Twitter or something, and then we stopped using it for 9 months or even a year in many cases until the models became better and there were more announcements, and then all of a sudden it started to become really useful for actually getting work done as opposed to just a gimmick. But it was all about acquiring the user and getting that share of mind. Now coming back to Superhuman, we knew that we needed to retain users after they were onboarded. We couldn't afford to just get loads of users and then have them churn, and maybe we'll get them back one day, maybe not, because it was part of our growth engine to have them be delighted from day one. That meant that we had to charge right out of the gate. We couldn't give this thing away for free. Many of our competitors were trying and failing. Too much volume of customers and too many bugs being experienced for them to keep up. But then if we're charging all this money, how do you get customers to actually be successful? Now, email is also a product where there's a ton of workflow and what I call baggage to onboard to be onboarded successfully. So that's why we did the one-on-one concierge onboardings for many years. We onboarded hundreds of thousands of customers one-on-one, and that package fit with the high price point and the differentiation versus the competitors. This is not for everybody. What I think is for everybody is manually onboarding your first couple of customers. Even a product giving something away for free should do that. At least a little bit. Even a company that's land grabbing users should do that at least a little bit. More of a question of, it's a stopping problem. How much do you do it? In our case, we did it a lot, but there are companies where I think you do it a little bit and then you just go fully self-serve. And there are some companies where you onboard forever. Really, really complicated B2B SaaS. You probably will have an implementation team, forever. And that's fine and worth it because the product is complicated enough that you just need to do that. But for us, all of that was kind of the way that we attacked the market. And I think it's interesting you mentioned the price point wasn't very common for productivity tools. It now is, right? And maybe that's thanks to us perhaps, but maybe there's a lot of products that have, they're the equivalent of the Gmail, and there are lots of other startups that are now building the thing that is like the Superhuman for that product. But I'm starting to see the $30 a month price point as like a pretty common place for power user productivity and workflow /collaboration products.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that. It's also the case at Jamie.
Great, perfect.
So this is always me arguing, hey, we're building the Superhuman for meetings, and the price point can be charged for superior software.
Yeah, amazing.
I think there has been already like tons of very, very valuable advice by you, so I'm very grateful for that. If there's one thing on growth, one advice you would like to give to maybe early stage founders, but also Series A, Series B, scaling founders in general, what would you suggest, or what would it be?
So something that I see come up a lot with particularly B2C startups, but also to an extent B2B, is not paying enough attention to churn and not paying enough attention to the mechanics of what that churn does to your revenue over time before starting to think about acquisition. So when I think of growth, I think about the ARR number going up and to the right, which is a function of both churn and acquisition. What I see a lot of is B2C startups that are trying to acquire their way out of a product that doesn't retain very well. And some companies can do this, right? Some companies are generational, like Netflix and Spotify and Dropbox and ChatGPT. They can acquire like crazy because everyone in the world can use them. Plus, they are either the first to market or the best in the market by a long shot. So then they can get hundreds of millions of users, no problem, monetize a decent percent of those, have a great business for at least a couple of years. Cool. But many companies are just not that, right? Like the product isn't there yet, or the competitive landscape doesn't allow for such. And they're just one or two product hops away from a product that will retain significantly better. For a B2C product, this means your retention curve flattens out, and maybe it even like goes up over time as you reactivate users. For a B2B company, it's all about your NRR being greater than 100%, meaning every logo you acquire, you have more revenue at the end of the month or year than you started with for that logo. Not enough companies pay enough attention to this, in my view. And yes, there are some companies where you have to just acquire your way out of problems, right? Like you can escape the gravity for a certain amount of time, but eventually it catches up. And I think it's pretty critical to be thinking about this for founders pretty much from day one, even if you don't act on it for some time, or if you're constantly acting against it with an allocation of resource for many, many years.
It's super, super valuable, and resonates a lot. I think we also could have focused on that earlier, but this is not the number one thing you kind of look at, but maybe should. And also with like, I think now with many new AI tools getting out there, it's becoming more and more relevant. Maybe two last questions. Second to last, what's your favorite Superhuman shortcut?
Yeah, so I am going to talk about more of a feature that we're in alpha on because it's exciting, where we're using AI now to process your sent mail to see if it needs a reminder on your behalf. So you don't have to remember to set a reminder. We just validate that this is the kind of message that probably needs a reminder. And we auto-surface those emails back in your inbox after a set amount of time with the follow-up email already written. This thing is mind-blowing. I've been absolutely stunned at how many messages I send where I kind of forget to set a reminder. And I'm like, wow, that was a missed opportunity. That would have been a missed opportunity if I didn't follow up on it. This is really cool. It's in alpha right now. It's a little bit, I should say, overzealous in its categorization. There's a lot of things coming back to me where I'm like, I didn't need to follow up on that. I'd rather it be that way though than the other way. So that's not a shortcut as such. It's more of just a feature that is pretty cool. And again, it's like I think every communication tool should have this. I wish like Slack and other things sort of had something similar. But maybe we'll be the first to bring it to life, and then everyone else can do it.
I think that's access to this.
Yes, good question. Well, eventually it will be released, but maybe if you email the team, Command K feedback, they'll add you to some list which might grant you access.
Cool. Yeah, I think would definitely be super helpful. And then last question, where can people actually follow you or connect with you if they want to learn more about you and also the growth learnings that you share regularly?
Appreciate you asking. I post sometimes on LinkedIn, Twitter. I won't say my handles because that makes no sense in the context of a podcast. Maybe you can add them to the show notes. Yeah. LinkedIn, Twitter, and I write on Substack, and that's where people can subscribe and follow along with my, growth insights, founder advice, and spicy takes.
Cool. Yeah, can definitely recommend anyone doing that. And thank you so much, Gaurav, for taking the time to join me here.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure, and also many, many learnings. So really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. The pleasure's all mine.